Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you this morning. So we're going to begin today with my asking you, how will you use your life? With the life that you've got remaining, what will you make of yourself? How might you reinvent yourself? And why would you want to do that? And the way I'm going to go after that theme is we're going to take a look at 3 engines of change, and the story will build. First, we are in the midst of a longevity revolution. If you take a look with me at this chart, you see that on the very first day of the 20th century, the average life expectancy in North America was 47 years. On the last day, it had vaulted to 78. That's a bigger lift in 1 century than in the previous 900 years combined. In fact, I'm going to click this little device in my hand and show you the life expectancy lift not over the past 1,000 years, but over the past 100,000 years. And here the story gets really interesting, because medical anthropologists now tell us that throughout 99% of human history, the average life expectancy worldwide was under 18. So there were 40-year-olds and 60-year-olds and 90-year-olds, but not many. And the point is simple but perhaps profound, and that is that throughout all history, most people didn't age, they died. So in the 18th century, couples didn't say, "Gee, honey, what would you like to do after retirement?" because you'd be dead. Our medical system didn't need to be expert at things like hypercholesterolemia, osteoarthritis, adult onset diabetes, because people were inclined to die young of acute infectious diseases, accidents, trauma, before they got old enough to have their bodies wear out. And this has never happened before. And I would even argue that this longevity revolution, at the end of the day, will have a bigger impact on who we think we are, what more we have to do with our lives, the relationship within families, the competitiveness of nations, than either the industrial or technological revolutions of previous centuries. The effect of the elevations in longevity is that 2/3 of all the men and women who have ever lived past 65 in the entire history of the world are alive today. I'm going to say that again. 2/3 of all the people who have ever lived past 65 in the entire history of the world are alive today. And then, of course, it makes us ask the question, well, if we're living longer and longer and longer and longer on average, well, then how old is old? Most of us use the number 65 in our minds. In fact, I think it's the most powerful number in the world. I can get off the plane in Germany or London or Kuala Lumpur, and I can dial up or dial down those nations' economies simply by altering the age of retirement. And it probably lives in your mind, that number 65. Well, where did it come from? It was actually selected in the 1880s by Otto von Bismarck when he was crafting Europe's first pension plan and needed an age at which people would be so enfeebled they simply couldn't get up and work. He picked 65. But it's really important that you keep in mind that the life expectancy in Europe and North America that year was 45. So Bismarck was a very clever actuary. It'd be a little bit like giving people their old age discounts today starting at 98. So what does 65 look like these days? Well, Sophie Loren was 65 when this picture was taken. Just to give you a frame of reference, when Whistler painted his mom, she was right around the same age. So this is kind of a little multiple choice option here. I was asked by CNN to do some of the commentary when John Glenn announced he was going to be going up into space at 77. And I watched his first day of interviews, and a lot of the young reporters sort of attacked him. You know, geezer goes into space, big publicity gimmick. And Glenn, who I testified beside Glenn in Congress, Glenn is a very tough guy. And he turned to these young reporters and he said, "Hey, wait a minute. Just because I'll be 77 doesn't mean I still don't have dreams." And I tell you what, it got my attention. It got me thinking. Because I think we think that our kids, our grandkids have hopes and dreams, and then they either realize them or they don't. But once you become 50 or 55 or 60, it's time to just sort of wander to the margins. I think that era is over. Even Madison Avenue has begun to take notice.
Меня зовут.
One morning I woke up and I knew you were really gone. A new day, a new way.
Robert, it's not too late to change your mind.
No, my bags are packed. Bye, hon.
And carry on. Rejoice, rejoice, 'cause we have no choice but to carry on. Carry on. Love is coming to us all.
Right? The second engine of change I find to be every bit as interesting. Historically, we've lived what I'll call a linear life plan. You learned, you worked, you rested, you died, and that was sort of the deal. And most of us haven't even stopped to think that there's anything flexible about that. That's just the way it is. I have some pictures. First, you learned, and there was even a theory why you should do all your learning when you were young. The theory said, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And we lived by that. And then you fell in love, and it always lasted to the last breath you took. You divided up the responsibilities. Honey, I'll do this, you do that. The kids always turned out perfect. And then right before you died, you took a cruise, and that was the package. But what if you thought that you might have a longevity bonus? What if I had magic, and I don't? But what if I could give you 3, 5, 10, 20, 30 more years of life than your grandparents would have imagined they would have encountered in their life? Where would you put them? Don't say anything, just think. If you had a longevity bonus, where would you put it? Well, I've given talks now to 2.5 million people. I've met 5 presidents. I've met many world leaders from Tony Blair to Nelson Mandela. And over all those years and all those miles, no one has ever said to me, I'd put him at the end. What I'd really like is to be old longer. What people say is, if I got a longevity bonus, I'd like to distribute it. Why wait until you're old and then just have more years being old? If you knew you were going to live longer, maybe what you do is you go back to school a few times. Maybe you retire and then come out of retirement. Maybe if you're in a marriage that's not working, you seek a relationship and you fall in love again. Maybe if you always liked playing the piano, but they told you weren't very good, and now you're 58 and you really want to play the piano again, and you know what? Who the hell cares if you're not very good, as long as you're enjoying it? Or maybe you're 90, you want to run a marathon. Or maybe you're 85 and you decide you want to try a book of poetry. This is a different model. And I would have to say the greater longevity gives us the time for personal reinvention again and again and again. My grandparents, when they were 60 or 65, were not thinking about their next career. Which takes us to our third theme, the rethinking of retirement. Something that many of you think about, talk about, are living or on the edge of, wondering about. If you go to Webster's Unabridged Dictionary and look up the word retirement, it's quite interesting what you find. It says to disappear, to go away, to withdraw. Retirement.
Value this time in your life, kids. Because this is the time in your life when you still have your choices. And it goes by so fast. When you're a teenager, you think you can do anything, and you do. Your 20s are a blur. 30s, you raise your family, you make a little money, and you think to yourself, what happened to my 20s? 40s, you grow a little pot belly, you grow another chin. The music starts to get too loud. One of your old girlfriends from high school becomes a grandmother. 50s, you have a minor surgery. You'll call it a procedure, but it's a surgery. 60s, you'll have a major surgery. The music is still loud, but it doesn't matter because you can't hear it anyway. 70s, you and the wife retire to Fort Lauderdale. Start eating dinner at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You have lunch around 10, breakfast the night before. Spend most of your time wandering around malls looking for the ultimate soft yogurt and muttering, how come the kids don't call? How come the kids don't call? The 80s, you'll have a major stroke. You end up babbling to some Jamaican nurse who your wife can't stand, but who you call mama. Any questions?
So, what do we see? I've now spent, I got involved in the field of aging when I was 23. I'll be 60 next month. So I've spent 36 years on this subject, and I must say that I think that we talk a lot about how to live a longer life in terms of nutrition, and one of my great, great heroes is going to be here in a little while. Dean Ornish should talk about that, Heroes and Friends. We talk a lot about technology, but what are we going to do with ourselves? What about the fact that we have a society that actually hasn't created a role for mature people? What about we send people to the sidelines just when they have their greatest accumulation of knowledge and wisdom and perspective, the best Rolodexes in town, and then we tell them to go away? I've done a number of massive studies all over the world. One of them, we found that there were four types of retirement experiences. I'll hit them very quickly. One group we called the ageless explorers. They felt youthful, active, empowered. They felt that these were the best years of their life, and by the way, 80% of them were working, which really gets things confusing because the happiest retirees seem to remain working, even if it's for no money. And then my mom and dad are in this category. We had a group we called the comfortably contents. Retirement is a vacation, 24/7 vacation. By the way, nothing wrong with that, but that's their dream, just to play and to relax and to watch TV. And by the way, last year the average retiree watched 48 hours of television a week. Third group, we call the live for todays. Fun, adventuresome, well-educated, colorful people. The problem is, all along the way, they were living for today. And while that's a psychologically useful strategy, as a financial strategy, it's devastating. So now they find themselves at 61 or 83 and they have no money. And retirement is no fun at all if you don't have financial security. And the fourth group, we call the sick and tireds. They've kind of given up. You may have friends or relatives in this category. They have nothing that they want to do. They don't want to take an elder hostel class. They're too tired to play with the grandkids. They feel that life is over. These people were heading to be sick and tired when they were 30. Now, we also did another study where we asked people what's their ideal plan. Well, only 30% of people want to stop working and never work for pay again. And there's been a flip-flop. In the 1980s, it was the high achievers that wanted to stop working and live the life of leisure. In fact, it was a reflection of status. Now it's the blue-collar workers. Almost nobody wants to work full-time. People say part-time work, a few days a week, that might be fun. But the number one choice is that people would like to create a new balance between work and leisure. Like to do some of one and some of the other and have a different kind of balance in their lives. Then we asked, do you want to keep doing what you've been doing your whole career? 41%. But the majority of people now say, I'd like to try something different. I'd like to take my knowledge and skills and available time and maybe change the world. Or maybe volunteer to help coach the local volleyball team. Or maybe help in the schools. My mom goes in and teaches tap dancing to young kids in the neighborhood where she lives in South Florida. Trying something different, that sense of coming alive by doing something new. People want a balance in their retirement years. They, of course, want more time to play, particularly with the people they love. They want to continue learning, like you're doing here today, and in all the different venues, whether they be on the internet, community college, or actually going back to college. People also may want to try an encore career, giving a shot at something that they perhaps have always wanted to do, but didn't have the time or the wherewithal or the focus to give it a try. And I think more and more people are thinking about, how do I leave a legacy, maybe even live a legacy? How do I do something with this stage of my life that's more important, that's more meaningful, that has more purpose? And I honestly think that when you reach your 50th birthday or thereabouts, people start thinking about, how do I make the transition from success to significance? How do I make the transition from aiming at money and wealth and more to doing something important, significant? So I think there's a new definition of retirement emerging. I think people want to remain engaged. People want to reinvent themselves. And people want to live their lives with purpose. And at the end of the day, what could 75 look like? Well, this gentleman was 75 when his picture was taken. And so is this. And my last clip before I tie all these things together.
17 miles every morning. People ask me how I keep my teeth from chattering in the wintertime. I leave them in my locker.
So if there's one thing I'm quite convinced about, is that whether you've got an ache or a pain, whether you've had loss in your life, whether your business was a great success or didn't meet your dreams, the choice to live with purpose is something you have some control over. But it requires volition. It requires a consideration. I think this is something I'd like to do more of. And it doesn't have to be full-time. You don't have to break any records. The choice is ours. And so there's a few major forces at play here. One of them is that we are living longer than humans have ever lived before. And so we like to think that the new is what the young people will do. But I think the story of humanity that has yet to be written is the 60-year-old entrepreneur, the 70-year-old business person who becomes a philanthropist, the 80-year-old newlyweds, the 90-year-old who goes back to school, the 100-year-old that wants to refresh the dreams of youth or do even more with his or her life than ever dreamed before. The cyclic life is making it more normal, more natural. There are more institutions that help people rediscover their interest, reinvent themselves. There are more role models of people doing this. And last, we've learned enough now about retirement in its first 50 years of existence that those people who simply stop doing an active life, a productive life, and go off to the sidelines feel lonely, feel isolated, feel useless. And those people that give back of themselves, that stay engaged, that stay connected, that think of themselves as living their lives with purpose, have the grandest time of all. Hopefully I've given you a few things to think about in these few minutes. I know you'll be hearing a great many interesting people over the next several days. Thank you so much for your patience.